My best friend stole my husband. So I catfished her with a fake millionaire. Was posted by Tell Me Why Though, and what happened next was something even I couldn't have predicted. I'm Anna, and this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's a story about strategy, revenge, and the lengths one woman will go to reclaim what was stolen. Claire, my ex-best friend, my sister by choice, didn't just take my husband. She dismantled my career, my social circle, and the life I had spent years building. She thought she was untouchable, that she could outsmart everyone with her charm and ambition. But she underestimated me. I built a world so convincing it could fool anyone, including her. A billionaire named Sebastian, reclusive, untouchable, powerful. He was everything Claire craved and everything I controlled. Every message, every email, every late-night call was part of a web she would never escape. I watched her ambition blind her, her greed push her into my trap, and finally, I struck. This is the story of betrayal, obsession, and the slow, meticulous unraveling of a woman who thought she had it all, only to discover she had nothing. By the end, she learned what it truly means to be outplayed. My name is Anna, and I'm standing at the bar of the most exclusive new restaurant in Chicago, watching my ex-best friend Claire scan the room. She's electric with anticipation. She's wearing a dress I recognize, because I paid for it. Everything she has is mine in a way. My husband, my social circle, even my job. But tonight, she's not looking for my husband, Mark. He's sitting right next to her, looking confused and stressed. No, she's looking for him. Sebastian, the man she thinks is her future. The man she thinks is a reclusive, tech empire millionaire. I take a sip of my martini as her phone on the bar buzzes with a new message from Sebastian. She reads it and her face lights up. She has no idea the text is coming from my phone, from my seat, 20 feet away. I can't help but smile. There's something delicious about watching her fall into the same trap she once set for me. The predator becoming the prey. A year ago, that would have been me sitting there beside Mark, my hand resting on his arm, my life perfectly in place. Now I'm the woman she whispered about behind my back, the one she pitied. But tonight, that pity will turn into panic. She doesn't know that every message from Sebastian, every photo, every detail of his life is my creation. I built him from scratch, down to the way he signs his name with a little M dash like an afterthought. That was Mark's quirk once. Funny how I remembered. The waiter walks past me, the scent of rosemary and expensive wine drifting in the air. My heart beats with a rhythm I haven't felt in months, something close to excitement, something dangerously near power. It's addictive. I send another message. I'm running late, love. Can't wait to finally meet you. Claire's eyes soften at the words. Her lips part in a small smile, the kind she used to give me when she pretended to care. Mark says something to her, but she barely listens. Of course she doesn't. Claire never really listened unless she could gain something from it. And now, all her attention belongs to the ghost I've created. I remember when I first suspected her and Mark. Late nights at the office. Those secretive texts he brushed off as work stuff. The shift in her voice when she talked to me about him. How she started dressing differently, wearing her hair the way he liked mine. It took me too long to connect the dots, too long to realize that the woman I trusted most was chiseling away at the life I built. And when it finally shattered, when Mark confessed it had been going on for 6 months, I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just looked at him and said, "You'll regret this." He thought I meant him. I stir my martini slowly, watching the ice melt, feeling the same slow unraveling I once felt in my chest. Except now I control the pace. She thinks she's waiting for a man worth millions, a man who could change her life. The irony is I've already changed it. Piece by piece. I created Sebastian to be everything she's ever wanted. Charming, rich, generous, and most importantly, gullible. The perfect reflection of what she thought she deserved. And soon, she'll find out just how cruelly perfect that reflection can be. Mark shifts in his seat. He's checking his watch again, clearly uncomfortable. He doesn't want to be here. I know that look. I lived through years of it. But Claire is lost in her little fantasy, and I can see it all over her face. She's convinced this is the night her life takes a turn. And she's right, just not the way she thinks. I send another message. Your eyes looked so beautiful in that photo you sent. Can't stop thinking about them. I watch her fingers tremble as she types back. You'll see them soon. I take another sip, letting the gin burn my throat, feeling alive for the first time since everything fell apart. Funny how vengeance has a taste. It's sharp, citrusy, and it goes down smoother than forgiveness ever could. The bartender glances at me, maybe wondering why I'm smiling to myself like that. I just wink. He doesn't need to know. Nobody does. Then something happens. Claire looks around, her phone buzzing again, and her expression flickers, just for a second. Doubt. She glances at Mark, then back at her phone. I've been careful. Too careful. But it's the smallest things that crack a mask. I send a message that makes her sit up straighter. I see you. Her eyes dart toward the entrance, then the window. I can almost hear her heart race from here. She replies, "Where?" I wait. I don't answer. Not yet. I want her to feel the tension crawl up her spine the way it used to crawl up mine when I realized she was lying. Mark leans in, says something, maybe asks what's wrong, but she ignores him. She's too busy scanning the room. Her confidence, her arrogance starts to slip. The perfect Claire is starting to crack. I can't help the small laugh that escapes me, quiet and sharp. The waiter passes by again and gives me a strange look, but I don't care. This is my moment. Finally, I type, "You're even more beautiful than your photos." She stiffens. She turns slowly, eyes darting from table to table, and for the briefest moment, her gaze brushes past me. I lift my glass slightly, almost like a toast. She doesn't notice. But I see the panic, the thrill, the confusion swirling in her eyes. The game has officially begun. She leans back in her chair, pretending to stay calm, but her grip on her phone tightens. Mark notices now. He's frowning, asking her what's going on. She shakes her head, forces a laugh, tries to play it off. But I know that look too well, the one that says she's no longer in control. And that's the sweetest thing I've seen all night. I sip the last of my martini, savoring the moment. The night is young and the trap is set. Claire doesn't know it yet, but every message she sends, every heartbeat that races in her chest, is being pulled by my strings. For the first time in a long time, I feel something close to justice, twisted, quiet, and deliciously slow. Tonight, the woman who stole everything from me will finally understand what it feels like to lose it all. Let me back up. Claire and I weren't just friends. We were sisters. Or at least that's what I believed. We met fresh out of college, both hungry, both ambitious, both desperate to make something of ourselves in a city that devours the naive. I was the strategist, the one who built the campaigns, crafted the plans, saw 10 steps ahead. Claire was the face, the charm, the laughter, the magnetic personality that drew clients in. Together, we were unstoppable. The agency world ate that up. "You two are like yin and yang," our boss once said, watching us finish each other's sentences in a client meeting. And we were, until I learned what happens when the balance tips too far toward the darkness. We became a package deal. If one of us got hired, the other followed. We shared offices, apartments, even dreams. I thought we'd climb the ladder together, celebrate every promotion side by side, maybe even start our own agency one day. She made me believe we were in this for life. I still remember those late nights after presentations, the city lights bleeding into our office windows as we shared cheap champagne and whispered about our futures. I told her everything. My fears, my insecurities, my plans. She was my mirror, until she wasn't. Then I met Mark. God, Mark. The quiet architect with gentle eyes and the kind of steadiness that anchored me. I was the whirlwind. He was the calm. Claire met him at our third date dinner. I introduced them thinking she'd be the perfect test. Claire had that instinct for people. If she liked someone, it meant they were genuine. She liked Mark instantly. Too much, maybe, but I didn't see it then. I thought it was sweet, the way she teased him, how she said, "He's got good bones, Anna. You picked a solid one." I thought she was happy for me. I had no idea she was already studying him, learning the small details that would someday be used against me. When Mark proposed, Claire was the first person I called. She screamed so loud the whole cafe turned to look at me. "You're going to be the most beautiful bride," she said. "You deserve everything." She cried when she said it. Looking back, I think they were real tears, but not for me. Maybe they were for the version of her that always wanted what I had. At the wedding, she stood by my side, radiant, glowing almost as much as I was. Her toast was perfect. Every line, every pause, every tear. "Anna," she said, her voice trembling, "you've been my sister since the day we met. And Mark, you've been the brother I never had. I can't wait to watch your life unfold." The crowd melted. Even Mark squeezed my hand under the table, whispering, "She's something else." He meant it as a compliment. I should have taken it as a warning. After that, Claire was a fixture in our home. Tuesday dinners, Friday drinks, Sunday brunches. She knew the code to our garage, had a key to the back door. Sometimes I'd come home from work and find her already there, helping Mark cook or folding laundry like she belonged. And I thought it was wonderful. I thought, how lucky am I to have someone who loves us both so much? I remember one night so clearly it still haunts me. Mark had been working late, and Claire came over with a bottle of wine. To celebrate, she said. Celebrate what? I asked. You silly. You got the Harper account. We toasted, and she told me how proud she was. But her eyes kept flicking toward the window, like she was waiting for something. When Mark walked in an hour later, she practically glowed. There he is, she said, like she'd been holding her breath for him. I noticed it, but I brushed it off. You notice a lot of things in hindsight, and then came the condo. Claire's credit was a mess. Years of bad decisions, missed payments, the aftermath of some reckless ex-boyfriend she never stopped talking about. She sat on my couch crying, hands shaking, mascara running, saying she'd lose the apartment she'd been dreaming of. I'll never ask you for anything again, Anna, I swear. I believed her. I co-signed the loan. Mark said I was too trusting. I told him that's what friendship is. A week later, she handed me a candle with a note that said, "You saved my life." I kept that candle on my desk for months. Every time I looked at it, I felt warm, proud, loved. Now I know it was just another prop in her performance. The signs were all there. I just didn't want to see them. The way she'd linger a little too long when Mark made her laugh. The way she'd talk about him when he wasn't around. You're so lucky, Anna. He's such a good man. The way she always found a reason to sit next to him at dinners, or brush his arm when she passed. Small things. Harmless things. Until they weren't. One night, after too many drinks, she confessed something strange. We were sitting on the floor of her condo, candles flickering, the city humming outside. Do you ever think, she said, that you ended up with the life I was supposed to have? I laughed, thinking she was joking. What do you mean? She smiled almost sadly. You know, the good job. The good husband. The happy ending. I told her she'd get all that too. I told her she deserved it. And she smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. Maybe, she said. Or maybe I'll just borrow yours for a while. I didn't understand what she meant until years later, when I walked into my own kitchen and saw the way they looked at each other when they thought I wasn't watching. It's funny. People always ask how betrayal happens. They imagine it's sudden, explosive, that it hits like lightning. But it doesn't. It's slow. It seeps in through small cracks. A laugh here. A favor there. A whisper that sounds harmless until it isn't. You never see it until you're already drowning. Looking back, I can trace every step, every moment I handed her another piece of my life. My trust, my money, my home, my husband. And she took them all, smiling, crying, thanking me every step of the way. And when the truth finally came out, when I found out what she'd done, it wasn't her lies that broke me. It was realizing how much of it was my fault for believing she could ever love anything she couldn't own. The betrayal wasn't a single moment. It wasn't an explosion. It was a slow poisoning, a quiet undoing that began long before I ever realized I was dying from it. It started when Mark got distant. That's the word people use when they're too cowardly to tell you they're already halfway gone. He was stressed, tired, buried in a new project. I believed him. I even defended him. He's just overwhelmed, I told my friends. Architects work long hours. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, I'd wake up to an empty side of the bed and hear his voice faintly in the other room, low and careful. When I asked who he was talking to, he said it was a client. I wanted to believe him. I really did. At the same time, Claire started pulling all-nighters too. We've got a huge campaign coming up, she said, hair in a messy bun, coffee in hand, eyes full of purpose. If I can nail this, Richard might finally notice me. I smiled, proud, supportive. That's what best friends do, right? We lift each other up. We celebrate each other's wins. I didn't realize then that while I was cheering her on, she was sharpening her knives. I can still remember one specific night, one of those memories that burns itself into your brain no matter how much you try to scrub it clean. It was raining. Mark was working late, and Claire said she needed to use my Wi-Fi because hers was down. We sat on my couch, wine glasses half empty, laughing about nothing. Her phone buzzed, and she smiled at the screen in this strange, private way. Work thing? I asked. She nodded, tucking the phone away quickly. But I saw the name flash for half a second. M. My M. The weeks that followed were filled with cracks that I kept plastering over. Missed calls. Secretive texts. A lipstick smudge on one of Mark's dress shirts. Coral, a shade I never wore. When I pointed it out, he smiled tightly. You're imagining things. I laughed it off, feeling stupid, needy, paranoid. Claire would tease me when I brought it up. You're overthinking, she'd say, patting my hand. You've always had an overactive imagination. Funny thing to say to a strategist, someone whose job was to notice patterns. Then came the day everything fell apart. The day that gutted me so cleanly I didn't even feel it at first. I was supposed to be made partner at the agency. I had worked 10 years for that title. 10 years of sleepless nights, thankless pitches, and carrying Claire through deadlines when she couldn't pull her weight. I even bought a new blazer for the occasion. Power blue, confident. I remember smiling at my reflection that morning, whispering, "You did it." When Richard, my boss, called me into his office, I expected congratulations. Instead, he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Anna," he said, his voice heavy, "we have a problem." I sat down, still smiling, still not understanding. Then he slid a stack of papers across the desk. Emails, screenshots, my name, my address, my signature. "We've discovered you've been leaking proprietary concepts to a rival firm," he said quietly. "The board voted this morning. We have to let you go." I laughed at first. It was so absurd. "That's impossible," I said. "I would never—" Then I looked down. The printouts. My pitch, my ideas. The campaign I'd spent months building. The one that was going to secure me that partnership. All of it sent from my IP address, time-stamped, perfectly timed to destroy me. My heart sank. I remember the ringing in my ears, the feeling of the room closing in, Richard's voice fading out. He looked sad, almost pitying. "I'm sorry, Anna. We've already notified corporate security." I stumbled out of the building in a haze, clutching my purse like it was the only thing keeping me from collapsing. I didn't cry. Not then, I was too stunned. I just kept thinking this has to be a mistake. Maybe someone hacked me. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. And when I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something immediately. Mark's car was gone. At first, I thought he'd gone out for groceries or maybe to cool off after another long day. But when I walked into the bedroom, the air felt different. Still. Hollow. His closet door was open, half empty. The drawers, too. Then I saw it. A folded piece of paper lying neatly on the bedspread. I sat down, heart hammering, and opened it. "I'm sorry," it began. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I tried to fight it, but I can't. I'm in love with Claire." It didn't even feel real. I read it over and over, expecting the words to change. Expecting some kind of explanation, an apology that made sense. But there was nothing else. No forwarding address, no goodbye. Just a single sentence that shattered everything I'd ever known. My body went cold. I remember walking through the house, numb, touching everything like I was saying goodbye. The coffee mugs we'd collected. The framed wedding photo on the wall. The couch where Claire and I used to sit for wine nights. I looked at the note again. Claire. Her name was a knife now. That night I got an email from IT at the agency. They'd found the computer logs. "Someone accessed your terminal remotely," the message said. "It appears your credentials were used off-site." My hands shook as I clicked the IP trace. The location popped up, a familiar address. Claire's condo. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat there in the dark, replaying every moment, every laugh, every promise. The puzzle pieces fell into place one by one, and each one hurt worse than the last. The extra late nights, the glances, the way she defended him when I complained, the tears when she said she'd lost me. It had all been part of the act. By morning, the truth was blinding. They hadn't just betrayed me, they'd planned it, together, for months. They'd used my trust, my kindness, my access, and turned it all into a weapon. They'd dismantled my career, my marriage, my entire identity, and they'd done it with smiles on their faces. I didn't cry until I saw the empty space on his nightstand where our wedding photo used to be. That's when it hit me. Not the loss, but the realization that I had loved people who had never, not once, loved me back. And as I sat there, surrounded by the ruins of everything I'd built, I made myself a silent promise. If they wanted to destroy my life, fine. But I'd make sure they never forgot what it felt like to lose control of theirs. They were ruthless. Claire, my so-called sister, didn't waste a single day stepping into the ruins of my life. The ashes were still warm when she moved in, into my job, my marriage, my world. The week after I was fired, she was announced as partner. The official email said, "We're thrilled to promote Claire Bennett, whose loyalty and vision have been instrumental to our agency's success. Loyalty. The word made me sick. She'd stolen my ideas, my credit, my reputation, and wrapped it all in a bow of corporate charm. Everyone congratulated her, called her a rising star. No one mentioned that I had been the architect of every single campaign that put her name on the map. And Mark? He didn't just leave me. He moved into her condo, the one I had co-signed for, the one she couldn't have afforded without me. I still remember staring at the mortgage documents with my signature at the bottom, realizing that I was literally paying for the roof over their heads. I tried to imagine them there, her in her silk robe, him making coffee in my favorite mug, and the thought made my skin crawl. The world around me didn't just shift. It turned against me. Suddenly, I was the unstable one. The bitter wife. The woman who couldn't let go. Mutual friends stopped answering my calls. My boss, Richard, stopped replying to my emails. Even my parents, sweet, cautious people who always tried to see the best in everyone, told me, maybe it's time to move on. Move on? From what? From the theft of an entire life? I started hearing things. Rumors whispered in the circles I used to command. She was too intense. Mark couldn't handle her. She sabotaged her own career. Claire had rewritten the story, and people believed her because she said it with a smile. That was her power. She could make poison taste like honey. And I was the bitter aftertaste everyone avoided. My divorce lawyer, Jessica, tried to prepare me. Anna, she said, her tone carefully professional, we're fighting an uphill battle here. He's already filed, and he's got the upper hand. I remember sitting across from her, numb, staring at the stack of papers that summarized the end of a decade. They've locked you out professionally and personally, she continued. The best we can do is try to negotiate for fairness. Fairness. The word meant nothing anymore. Fairness was for people who hadn't already lost everything. Money drained fast. Legal fees, rent, debt. My savings evaporated within months. The agency had blacklisted me. No one would touch my name after the leak scandal. Every interview ended the same way. Polite smiles, evasive comments, the subtle pity of people who didn't want to risk hiring the woman who'd supposedly betrayed her own firm. I was radioactive. I'd sit alone in my apartment, small, gray, silent, and scroll through social media, watching the two of them play house in my old life. Photos of dinners at my favorite restaurant. Weekends in the lake house that used to be mine. Smiles that looked rehearsed but convincing enough to fool the world. It was like watching a movie of my own life, only I'd been replaced by a more marketable actress. And then one night, the photo that changed everything appeared. I wasn't even looking for it. It popped up on my feed, tagged by a mutual friend. Claire and Mark, glowing, perfect, smug. They were at the charity gala that Mark and I used to host together. She was wearing a long black dress, hair perfectly curled, champagne in hand. And around her neck, gleaming against her skin, was my grandmother's necklace. The one thing I had left of my family. The one thing I'd kept in the top drawer of Mark's nightstand, tucked beneath an old photo of us at the lake. I stared at it for a long time, unable to breathe. Then I read the caption. Some things just find their rightful owner. My phone slipped out of my hand. I sat there on the floor, shaking, the glow of the screen flickering across my face. My grief, the constant dull ache that had lived in me since the day Mark left, suddenly hardened into something colder, sharper. Rage. Pure, crystalline rage. It wasn't the kind that made you scream or throw things. It was quieter than that. It burned inward, slow and deliberate. It whispered instead of shouted. I realized then that I had been mourning people who were still alive, people who didn't deserve my pain. Claire didn't just take from me. She fed off of what she took. Every tear, every broken piece of me. It was fuel for her story. I stopped crying that night. I stopped feeling sorry for myself. I opened my laptop, stared at the screen, and started making a list. Not of things I'd lost, but of things I could still use. Claire's habits. Her weaknesses. Her vanity. She'd always been drawn to money, status, the illusion of power. She couldn't resist it. I knew her better than anyone, better than she knew herself. And that meant I could predict every move she'd make. I didn't know how yet, but I was going to make her feel everything she made me feel. Jessica called me the next morning, talking about settlement options, about letting go gracefully. I told her I needed time to think. She assumed I meant about the divorce. What I really meant was the plan. The photo of Claire, smirking in my necklace, stayed open on my screen for hours after the call. I zoomed in on her face, studying it. memorizing every detail. The makeup, the expression, the arrogance. That was the moment something inside me shifted completely. The grief that had been rotting inside me was gone, replaced by a clarity so sharp it almost hurt. If Claire believed she'd won, she was wrong. She'd built her empire on deceit and stolen lives, and I was going to be the ghost haunting its foundation. That night, I deleted my social media, cleaned out my inbox, and stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My face looked unfamiliar, thinner, harder, alive. I whispered to myself, "You're not done yet." Because if there was one thing Claire had forgotten, it was this. I taught her everything she knows, and now, I was going to use it all to destroy her. Claire's weakness was never Mark. Mark was useful, a stepping stone, a warm body she could parade to prove she was wanted, but what she really craved was status. Money was a mirror for her. If it gleamed, she believed she shone. So I built a mirror that would shatter her. I called my cousin Leo first. Leo lives in Portland, eats ramen at 2 a.m., and can make a ghost walk through a city with a credit card and a Wi-Fi signal. "I need a ghost," I told him. And his laugh was the kind that told me he understood exactly how far I meant to go. We didn't rush. Building a believable lie takes patience. You have to think like the world thinks, what it envies, what it trusts, what it swallows whole without chewing. We started with a name, Sebastian Valois. It sounded like money whispered into velvet. It sounded like a man who had stepped out of an old European novel and bought every modern invention he liked. Leo spun up an email address with a Swiss domain, routed through VPNs that left no obvious trail. I bought a decade-old Instagram handle. Someone had abandoned it in 2014, and it was perfect, dusty, and credible. We cleaned it, but we didn't sterilize it. People trust a history, even a fake one. We filled it with scenic stock images, a minimalist Japanese home at dusk, a private jet wing over the clouds, an Icelandic fjord under northern lights. We licensed everything properly so when anyone looked, they'd see wealth, taste, and absence. The perfect trifecta. Next, the resume. We made him a reclusive tech genius who sold his AI startup for an obscene sum before he was 30. A Forbes 30 under 30 page from 2018, that was the crown. We didn't forge Forbes in a way that could be easily traced. We created a believable profile on a personal website and linked it in places that wouldn't scream fraud at first glance. Leo spoofed a Swiss phone number so every text would have that distant exclusive ring. I taught a text tone to my phone that sounded like a luxury watch ticking. Small details matter. People believe the details. I used a voice modulation app to build a voice for him. Lower, calm, with a faint accent that could be paused as European or cosmopolitan, depending on what Claire needed to hear. Sebastian needed to be elusive, never entirely present, always just out of frame, the kind of man who can be worshipped from a distance because you never know the real thing. The first message was clinical and casual. I wrote it late at night, revised it until it sounded like an accident of passion. "Ms. Bennett," it began, formal as a thank you note, then softer. "I've followed your work. Your campaign last spring changed the way I thought about audience architecture. I'd like to meet." I sent it from Sebastian's email to Claire's work address, CC'd to a private assistant address I created to make it seem official. She replied within hours, eager, luminous, the way people reply when the object of their desire notices them. Leo and I watched the thread unfurl like a flower. She didn't just answer. She performed. She put on a voice I'd heard before, the one that could charm an elevator full of strangers into buying champagne. She invited him to a coffee, and we turned it into a ritual. Sebastian's texts were perfectly timed. Never too frequent, never late, always just absent enough to seem mysterious. He sent blurry photos of a hand on a piano, a cufflink, a portion of a skyline shot from a penthouse, teasers that promised everything without delivering it. When she wanted proof of his wealth, we sent a carefully staged screenshot of a bank transfer confirmation, one of those legitimate-looking templates you can buy if you know where to look. We never crossed into outright forgery that could be traced back to us. Instead, we created plausible illusions that a hungry ego would swallow whole. She drank it up. She started dressing like the woman she imagined he'd want, tailored skirts, a new color of lipstick, an expensive haircut. She bragged about him in the office in that sly way Claire had, letting the gossip seed itself. "He's a private investor," she'd say. "He's exploring opportunities in augmented reality." I let her talk, let her inflate the balloon until it was so big it could only pop. Mark watched this all happen with a kind of glazed approval, as if he had trained for the role of understudy in our lives, and now could step forward and claim a leading line. At around the 250-word mark, and I swear this felt like a twist in the novel of my life, I sent a text that lit her up like the city at night. We escalated with precision. A private email introduced Sebastian as considering a seed round for an agency partnership. Nothing binding, only exploratory. I sent a faux calendar invite to meet for drinks at a neutral chic bar. Leo arranged an AI-generated voice note. Sebastian leaving a voicemail that sounded like a man who had less time than most, the kind of man whose scarcity becomes currency. Claire's messages got more effusive. She started texting me in the dark, screenshots of his notes, breathless whispers about what he might mean for her career. I let her believe that Sebastian saw her the way she saw herself, brilliantly deserving, finally visible. She began to make mistakes. She used the wrong email once and included a wry comment to a colleague about how lucky she was. I saw the message before she deleted it. She typed, "He's everything. He even said he'd back my new wing." That was the first real crack. She'd let the fantasy bleed into reality. I fed it. I suggested small private proofs of his interest, an invitation to a closed networking dinner, a supposed friend who could vouch for him. Every lie we told had scaffolding. Every illusion had an exit route. At the second quarter mark, the air smelled like inevitability. I'd taught Claire to want the thing I never got to want without guilt, privilege without consequence. And as she leaned in, I tightened the net. She was walking straight into a story written for her downfall, and she didn't even know she'd been cast. A message arrived one rainy Tuesday that made her stop breathing. Sebastian slid into her work email on a quiet Tuesday morning. I could almost picture the moment she opened it, her at her sleek new desk, hair perfectly in place, pretending to be busy while her assistant filtered out the world. The subject line was simple but irresistible. Private equity inquiry. The body of the email was pure craftsmanship. Ms. Hayes, I'd used her new name, the one she'd taken from Mark when she married him 6 months after the divorce papers were final. I've been following your... Impressive, Mize. Your work on the new pharma campaign was bold, even aggressive. I'm curating a private equity portfolio focused on disruptive female leaders in advertising. Are you open to a conversation? It was the perfect bait. Just the right mix of flattery and challenge. Claire never could resist a man who made her feel seen, but not yet conquered. Within 5 minutes, her reply landed. "Mr. Valois, I would be honored. I'm available anytime this week." I let her wait 24 hours. Timing was everything. By the time I responded, she was already restless, refreshing her inbox like a teenager waiting for a crush to text back. "Wonderful," I wrote as Sebastian. "I prefer intimate conversations. Email can be so sterile. Do you use Signal?" She did. Within the hour, we were talking. Her messages came fast, a steady rhythm of vanity and vulnerability. It was intoxicating to read her words, to watch her peel herself open for someone who didn't exist. She started formal, polished, professional, but it didn't take long for her tone to soften. "I admire your privacy," she said once. "You're not like the usual men in this industry." I almost laughed. I was exactly the usual man, because she had built him out of her fantasies. I knew her tells. When she was lying, she used ellipses, trailing off like a confession she wanted you to ask for. When she was trying to impress, she used words she didn't quite understand. Synergy, legacy, disruption. When she was aroused by power, she used short sentences. I had her mapped down to punctuation. We talked for hours every night. Well, she talked. I listened. I was patient, sympathetic, the kind of man who made her feel like her flaws were genius misunderstood. She told Sebastian things she'd never told me, things I could practically see her whispering into the screen. "My partner, Mark," she wrote one night, "is artistically brilliant but financially stagnant. I'm tired of being the breadwinner. I'm tired of pretending we're equals." I remember sitting in my dark apartment, reading those words over and over, the irony burning like acid in my throat. Mark, the man who'd thrown away everything for her, was already just a piece of ballast weighing her down. I could almost pity him. Almost. But pity was a luxury I no longer afforded anyone. She started complaining about him often, in careful, self-pitying phrases. "He's lost his spark," she'd say. "He used to be ambitious, but now he's just... comfortable." It was classic Claire, always rewriting the story so she was the heroine escaping mediocrity. I fed it. I encouraged her discontent. "Comfort kills potential," I texted back as Sebastian. "Maybe you've outgrown the people who once grounded you." That line did something to her. I knew it the second I saw the typing bubble linger for a full minute before her reply came through. "I think you're right. I've been feeling that for a while now. I watched her unravel in real time. Every message she sent gave me more power. I'd drop breadcrumbs, half-truths, half-promises. I told her Sebastian had recently exited a project worth 8 figures, that he was looking to build something more meaningful. I mentioned philanthropy, empowering visionary women. That word, empowering, always hooked her. She started asking about his background, his philosophy, the kind of questions people only ask when they've already decided to believe. By the end of the first week, she was hooked. She canceled dinner with Mark for a late meeting. She stayed up past midnight talking to Sebastian, her phone lighting up the room she once called mine. I pictured her in their shared bed, screen glowing on her face, whispering to a man who didn't exist, while Mark lay beside her thinking she was answering work emails. I could almost feel the universe tilting back toward balance. At around that point in our correspondence, I sent the first emotional lure. "You remind me of someone," Sebastian wrote. "A woman I used to know before I had money. She was ambitious but unafraid to be soft. You don't meet many like that anymore." Her reply came instantly. "Maybe you met me before and just didn't know it." I smiled. The arrogance, the hunger, it was all still there, just gilded in sophistication. She thought she was seducing him. She didn't realize she was already halfway inside the trap. She started sharing more than she realized. Her work passwords, client gossip, even her travel plans. All of it voluntary, all of it wrapped in flirtation. "You'd love London," she wrote one night, sending a picture from her hotel suite. "Maybe you should join me next time." "I don't travel for business anymore," Sebastian replied. "I prefer personal reasons." I waited for her next move. She didn't disappoint. "Then let's make it personal." And there it was. The moment she crossed from curiosity into obsession. I leaned back, staring at the screen, feeling something close to triumph flicker through the exhaustion. This was the same woman who had laughed with Mark in my kitchen, the same one who had stolen my life like it was a game. Now she was sitting in that same hunger, waiting for a ghost to validate her existence. Mark was no longer enough. The condo, the promotion, the new name, none of it satisfied her. All it took was the smell of more money, the illusion of a higher status, and she was ready to burn it all down again. That was the thing about Claire. She could only love what she couldn't quite reach, and Sebastian was about to become the tallest pedestal she'd ever climbed, before it collapsed beneath her. Sebastian became her confidant, her obsession, her invisible empire. Every night she poured herself into him, into me. I could almost feel the pulse of her ambition through the screen. She was restless, greedy, hungry for validation wrapped in luxury. And I gave it to her in perfectly measured doses. "I'm impressed by your vision," Sebastian would say after she described her latest campaign. "You think globally. That's rare." Words like that to a woman like Claire were diamonds, cut precisely to catch her light. Soon she began to think of herself as his equal, a queen in the court of a phantom king. It didn't take long before I dangled the real temptation: investment. "I've been thinking about what you've built," I said through the modulated voice. Smooth and measured, the kind of accent that exists somewhere between London and Geneva. "The agency doesn't deserve you, Claire. You should have your own. You have too much vision to be someone else's asset." She laughed at first, modestly, playfully, but I could hear the eagerness hiding behind it. "Oh, I've thought about it," she said. "Every day, actually." "Then let's stop thinking." Silence. I could picture her biting her lip the way she used to when she wanted something badly but was afraid to say it out loud. "You mean—" "I mean," Sebastian said, "I'd like to invest in you." There it was. The spark. The same one she used to fake for me when she wanted a favor, only this time it was real. The sound of greed disguised as possibility. Over the next week, we built the illusion brick by brick. Sebastian sent over concept documents, terms, mock proposals, projections. Leo handled the technical side, generating pristine PDF contracts that looked so authentic, even a corporate attorney would have blinked before questioning them. Everything had logos, headers, digital signatures, notarization stamps. It was an empire of fiction wrapped in truth. Sebastian offered her $5 million in seed funding to start her own agency. "All I ask," he told her, "is a show of faith. I'm investing in you, not your baggage. I need to know you're all in." She didn't even hesitate. "Of course I'm all in," she said. "Then, prove it." The bait was set. Sebastian told her the investment needed to be structured through a new entity, a single-asset LLC to hold her. Ownership stake before the transfer of funds. "It's how my team manages risk," he said, which was just enough corporate jargon to make her nod. It protects us both. Leo, posing as Sebastian's attorney, sent her the paperwork, a flawless digital trail of legalese. It was thorough, intimidating, and beautifully hollow. Just fill this out, have your current holdings liquidated, and we'll wire the first tranche once your new account is ready, he wrote. Claire's reply came within the hour. Done. I'll start the process today. It was astonishing how easily she gave it all away. The same woman who had stolen my job, my husband, my life, handing her world over to a man she had never met, never seen, never even heard clearly. She sold her shares in the agency, cashed out her savings, even took a loan against the condo, the one I had co-signed years ago. Every dollar she had went into that new company, a single-asset LLC that existed entirely on Leo's encrypted server. She didn't know it, but she was putting everything into a box. And I was the one holding the key. I remember the night she told Sebastian she was ready. Her voice was breathless, trembling with anticipation. It's done, she said. Everything's set up. The LLC's in my name. I've transferred everything. When do we move forward? Sebastian's voice, my voice, was calm, teasing. Soon, very soon. You've done beautifully, Claire. I muted the call and sat there for a moment, staring at the waveform pulsing on my screen. Her voice on one side, mine on the other, two ghosts orbiting a lie. I should have felt guilt, maybe even shame, but all I felt was the stillness of control. Claire started to change after that. Her messages became erratic, full of nervous energy. Have you sent the wire yet? When can I expect confirmation? My accountant's asking questions. The urgency in her tone was a new flavor of desperation, one I'd waited years to hear. Patience, Sebastian would reply. We're finalizing some details with the Swiss account. Should I tell my team? Not yet. Some things are best kept quiet until they're real. That line silenced her for days. She didn't want to risk losing him, or the fantasy of him. She'd waited her whole life to feel chosen, elevated, seen. And I was the one who gave it to her, right before I'd take it all away. At one point, Mark even messaged me. He'd found Sebastian's name on one of her printouts. Just curious, he wrote from her phone, probably pretending to be casual. Who's Sebastian Valois? Sebastian replied, a friend who recognizes potential when he sees it. Claire panicked afterward, calling me, whispering that Mark was getting suspicious. He doesn't understand what this means, she said. He's scared I'll leave him. Are you? Sebastian asked. There was a pause long enough to taste. If I have to, she whispered. That was the moment I realized just how far she'd fall for the illusion. She wasn't just chasing money. She was chasing the feeling of being worshipped again. And Sebastian had become her altar. By the time she sent the final confirmation of her transfers, she was all in, financially, emotionally, spiritually. She'd emptied her accounts into a shell company with a name so sterile it could belong to anyone. Valian Holdings, LLC. It existed for exactly one purpose, to take everything she owned and make it disappear. And when the last document was signed, when she sent that final email, done. I'm ready for the wire. I sat there, fingers hovering over the keyboard, heart beating in rhythm with a kind of dark satisfaction I hadn't known I was capable of. Because this was it. The trap was sealed. The money was gone. The empire she'd built on betrayal now belonged to nothing. No one. Just a ghost. Sebastian's final message that night was short, simple, elegant. You've proven your faith, Claire. Now let's see if you can live with it. And as I hit send, I could almost hear the sound of the lock clicking shut. They started asking for a face. It arrived like a ripple through the pond, small, then impossible to ignore. I just want to see your face, Bash, Claire texted one night, the ellipses like bait on a line. I felt the floor drop out beneath me. For weeks, the phantom had been perfect. A voice, a persona, a curated absence that made her crave him harder. But a face, that was a risk that tasted like oxygen. If she saw a real man, if she recognized him, or if he wanted money, everything would collapse. I sat in the dark and thought of all the ways this could blow up. Then, somehow, the thought that had been simmering under everything rose to the surface. People are liars, and liars believe what they want to believe. If a face could be staged, blink and you miss it, then she'd keep chasing the dream without ever really touching it. Leo came through in the way he always did. Quietly, technically, with the kind of resources I didn't have. He found footage, bought a short clip from a conference vlogger. 3 shaky seconds of a man in a suit walking with purpose through the Beverly Hilton lobby. The footage wasn't flattering. It was grainy, handheld, the kind of hurried capture that says more authenticity than any polished headshot. We didn't hire an actor for a shoot. We didn't take a photo. We stole a moment someone else had recorded and made it ours. I told Claire Sebastian was at an exclusive tech summit, private guests only, security tight, a man who valued discretion above all. I sent her the clip as an accidental drop from an assistant's phone, a glitch during a video call. The feed flickered, a silhouette moved past, a profile that matched the photos on the profile we'd built. It was just enough. She texted back almost immediately. Was that? Her punctuation was a question and a confession. I typed calm as a cathedral. Security protocols. Can't risk a full call there, but he saw your work. I waited, feeling my pulse bark in my throat. She responded with heart emojis and one single word. Finally. She was a moth and Sebastian was every tiny, perfect flame we'd constructed. She wanted to burn. Her obsession became surgical. She started arranging her days to match his supposed schedule. Late dinners, canceled meetings, excuses that smelled like ambition. At the agency, she walked taller, shoulders back, speaking about global strategy and scalable models, with a cadence that made junior staffers swoon. I watched her in old videos, in meetings, in the bar where I used to sit close enough to whisper and laugh. It was grotesque and beautiful. She'd taken my voice, my work, and now she was modeling her life into something that could be packaged and sold. Sebastian, our ghost, was the finishing touch. At about the point when I thought I might crack from the stress of keeping the lie intact, she asked for more. An actual video call. Not a glitch, not a brief shadow, an eye-to-eye. My stomach dropped like a stone thrown through glass. I called Leo, and he suggested a triangle of excuses: an important security call, a server migration, a private dinner with a foreign investor. All of them sounded like corporate theater, but I needed something that would look real and remain unreachable. Then Leo offered another piece of loot, an unsolicited clip of the same man getting into a car outside the hotel, shot by a paparazzi-style account, a snippet that made him look hurried, important, untouchable. I stitched the two clips together, blurred the resolution, overlaid static. It looked raw. It looked unplanned. It looked exactly like an encounter that had been captured by accident. When I hit send, my hands trembled. The video loaded on her phone. The bubbles signaled that she was watching. The 3-second clip was longer now, a heartbeat stretched into a small eternity. She texted, "Oh my God, he's real." I could have laughed then. I could have sent one final message. You were never real to me either. But the me that wanted to scream had been replaced by something colder, precision. She started giving herself away faster after that. She shared private dates she'd scheduled in her new calendar marked Bash Meeting, and joked in a group chat about not letting Mr. Valois steal all the good wine. She forwarded emails to colleagues, whispering about future partners. Once drunk on the illusion, she left her laptop unlocked at a cafe, and I saw the subject line of an unsent message: Wire transfer confirmation, Valian Holdings. It was a name we'd used as a lock, and a name that meant she'd boxed everything she owned into a shell that led nowhere. The sight of it was intoxicating. I felt closer to finishing what I'd begun. Still, nothing in this felt clean. There was a sliver of me that flickered in the dark, thinking about legality, about ethics, about the line between retribution and hate. But those were luxuries guilt had no room for. Claire had stolen from me with a kind of practiced malice, smoothed by smiles. My revenge needed to be cruel in return, because cruelty had been the currency she'd spent without a second thought. The more she craved him, the more reckless she became. She started to ask for favors, introductions to investors, back-channel meetings she wanted to keep off paper. I dangled small crumbs, a private introduction at a gallery opening, which was really a planted text from a fake curator, a sham invitation to a dinner with a visionary, which was an empty reservation with a staff brief to deny entry. Each denial made her want Sebastian more. Each delay tightened the rope. Late one night, after she'd sent a message so pleading it made my chest ache. "Please, I need to know he's real," I realized how completely she'd fallen. She was willing to empty herself for an idea, for status, for a face that might never belong to a man who loved her. My finger hovered over the keyboard and I wrote back, deceptively soft, "He finds those who find themselves." It was a lie. It was also the truth. Claire had been found by a mirror that made her believe she was finally worthy. And mirrors break in two ways, by shattering or by cutting you until you bleed. I decided which would happen. The face was a tool, a fleeting image that made her feel seen and therefore exposed. She would keep walking toward what looked like light until she stepped off a cliff I'd spent months building. The thought tightened something in my ribs into a wire, and I realized then that there was no turning back. The trap was set and the theater lights dimmed. Claire walked right into the center of the stage wearing a crown of her own making. She moved through the last weeks like a woman convinced she'd already won. Interviews with boutique magazines, dinners with potential partners, champagne toasts that tasted like someone else's theft. She had traded our past for a glittering future, and I watched clinically as she burned each bridge behind her. When she stood up at that client dinner and told Mark, across the table in front of people who used to know me, that he lacked vision, the sound of it was like glass. It was loud enough to shatter his composure and small enough to let the room cheer. She did it to be seen. She did it to prove she could pick and choose who belonged in the new orbit she imagined. Mark stumbled out of that restaurant the way people do when they've been publicly unmasked. Slow, embarrassed, raw. He came to my door the next night with rain on his shoulders and regret in his voice. "Anna, I made a mistake," he said, voice thin as tissue. She isn't who I thought she was." Watching him plead felt like watching a dog apologize for barking. The man who left me for charisma now begged for forgiveness like a child hoping to be let back into the sandbox. I wanted to tell him the truth, that his cowardice had paved the road Claire walked on. But watching him with the humility of a broken man made my anger flare in a different way. I told him to get out. Not with malice, but with something sterner, finality. He left, and the door closed like a verdict. She, meanwhile, was signing away her world with the certainty of someone who thought the stamp of status could sanctify any decision. I'd watched her execute each move like a gambler blinded by a long winning streak. She liquidated her shares in the agency. She sold off art she'd once called meaningful. She took a loan against the condo I'd co-signed for. She sold the lake house weekends for cash. Every piece of paper became currency for one thing: the LLC. Valian Holdings became the altar where she laid down her life and swore an oath to an illusion. When Jessica dug into the clause with the kind of professional brutality lawyers have, my stomach did a cold flip. The partnership clause, I'd seen it in the mock contracts Leo had generated when I helped craft the offer, was surgical in its wording. It stated that in the event Claire failed to provide a secondary signatory from an approved list of managing partners by a specified deadline, full managing control would default to the investor's holding company. It read like legal poetry. It was unforgiving and absolute. Mark had been named as the preferred secondary signatory in the draft Claire had, carelessly, blindly, signed. She'd assumed it was a formality, a courtesy nod to her past life. She'd been drunk on the idea that her past would uplift, not bind. I remember the exact moment the pieces clicked. I sat at my kitchen table, the nightlight from the stove painting the papers in clinical white. Jessica's voice over the phone was quiet, almost reverent. The LLC is structured to require a secondary signatory within 30 days. Without it, managerial rights pass to the controlling investor. The words landed like a gavel. I exhaled and realized how simple it had been. She had handed me the keys, signed, and assumed the keys belonged to someone else. She had failed to notice that the name of the controlling investor on those documents led not to a bank in Geneva, but to an entity I controlled through Leo's layers. She had stacked her life into a box with a lock that only I, the architect of the lie, could open. When she burned the bridge with Mark, she didn't just hurt him, she eliminated the name she needed to keep managerial control. It was a careless, theatrical flourish that meant she could never retroactively satisfy the clause without admitting to the very fraud she was trying to hide. The system we'd set, slick, technical, moralless, had a fail-safe in its heart, a deadline tied to a human signature. By humiliating Mark in public, by declaring him insignificant, she'd severed the only practical route to preserving her own agency. It's almost delicious how fate sometimes answers brutality with arithmetic. I felt no joy at Mark's return. I felt only a strange, cold peace. The moral calculus that had haunted me for months began to balance. To the outside world, Claire was untouchable, successful, adored, untethered. To me, she was a woman who had gambled everything on a face and a whisper. The LLC stood like a sealed vault on paper. In practice, it was an empty coffin holding her assets hostage. I had the legal path to step in. Jessica had outlined our moves. Notices, filings, control maneuvers. It sounded clinical and dull, but it was the exact undoing I'd rehearsed in the long, sleepless year of my grief. She would wake up one morning to an email that would feel like winter. The notice of default, the transfer of managerial authority, the freeze on outgoing wires. All of it would come in documents so neutral they'd feel like a bureaucratic surprise rather than the earthquake she deserved. Her world, her money, her offices, her newly minted brand, would suddenly belong to an entity with no face, no charity, no intention but the return of what she took. She would try to fight it in court, to scream her version of justice into judges who speak in precedent, not outrage. By then, however, the public would be tired of the drama. Her friends would hedge their bets. Her investors would whisper about risk and reputation. That's when she'd finally understand the precision of what I'd built. Not just the sting of losing money, but the slow, undeniable collapse of the narrative she sold herself. She had spent her life crafting stories to make herself prevalent. I'd written the final chapter where she was the liar's heroine undone by her own ambition. And as for Mark, he would not be the bridge back. He'd been used, discarded, and now he stood in the ruins asking to be let in. I had no mercy left for people who walked away and then wanted shelter when the storm came. I would enact the plan Jessica outlined, and I would watch the legal locks click into place like icy applause. By the time Claire read the first notice, the room would smell like paper and cold metal. She would feel the world narrow to a single point of panic, and in that silence, she would finally meet the full weight of her choices, which brings us back to tonight. I can see her, Claire, perched at the bar like a queen waiting for her coronation. She's dressed to kill, hair perfectly in place, lips red, heels clicking against the marble. She scans the room with the anticipation of someone who believes the universe is finally bending to her. She has no idea the universe has already tipped, and it tipped long before tonight. At the other end of the bar sits Mark, slouched over his drink, the world having just ripped away another piece of him. Claire had outmaneuvered him professionally, personally, in every way she thought mattered. She had told their shared boss that Mark's work was uninspired, and that she was leaving to start her own, better thing. He was alone now, fired, reduced to the shadow of a man who once carried dreams bigger than mine. Her phone buzzes. I watch her eyes dart down, the glint of excitement reflecting the bar lights. The message reads, "I'm here. I've just sent you your final paperwork. It's a gift. Check your email." She taps open her inbox, her fingers trembling slightly, and I lean back against the bar, sipping my martini, letting the silence stretch. She opens the attachment. I see it happen in slow motion, the shift in her expression. Triumph gives way to confusion. Confusion unravels into pure, undiluted horror. The file is simple. Just a 10-second video. I appear on screen, seated on my couch, no filters, no voice modulator, just me. The grandmother's necklace sparkles on my neck under the warm light of the living room. My voice is calm, precise. Some things just find their rightful owner. I hold up the necklace. The one she had stolen, flaunted in her Instagram story like a trophy. Her face drains of color. The world she thought she'd built with cunning emails, fake promises, and ill-gotten trust collapses in her hands. She drops her phone, the clatter startling a couple at a nearby table. For the first time in months, her power feels nothing. There's no digital ghost to reassure her, no fake billionaire whispering sweet validation. Sebastian is gone. Her investments are locked, her assets controlled by a legal entity she doesn't understand. And the final piece, her psychological hold on her own success, has been ripped from her. She is naked in her ambition, stripped of illusions, confronted by the architect she underestimated. Mark watches from across the room, eyes wide with a mix of shame, relief, and disbelief. He can finally see what I have always known. Claire isn't brilliant. She's ruthless, short-sighted, and she underestimated me. He's not the man I wanted back. He's the man who left me, who let her manipulate him, and now he's a spectator to the reckoning. I don't need him. I never did. Claire doesn't move. She doesn't speak. Her mind races, trying to piece together what just happened. How did Sebastian, the man she thought was real, the man she trusted, the man she put her fortune in, turn into a digital ghost, a puppet, a mechanism to bring her to her knees? The realization hits her like a punch. Every calculation she thought she'd mastered, every plan she'd carefully plotted, every manipulation she'd deployed against me, all of it has backfired spectacularly. I stand, leaving the chaos behind. My tab is paid, the cool Chicago night waiting for me outside. The city hums, unaware of the private drama that just played out behind the glass. I take a deep breath, and for the first time in months, I feel unshackled. My strategy is complete, my revenge exacted. She underestimated me. That was her fatal mistake. I am not a victim. I am a strategist, a player who doesn't just react to life but orchestrates it. As I step into the night, the wind hits my face, crisp and clear. The lights of the city blur around me, but I don't need them. I have clarity. Justice has a sound, and it rang out tonight in the quiet shattering of a woman who thought she could steal everything I loved. Claire's empire was built on someone else's name, someone else's life, and now, like clockwork, it has crumbled under the weight of her arrogance. I walk down the street, heels clicking against the pavement, each step a punctuation mark on a story she'll never forget. The past year of betrayal, heartbreak, and meticulous plotting has led to this exact moment. My grandmother's necklace glints in my bag, a symbol of what was taken, what was reclaimed, and what it feels like to finally hold power where it belongs. I am Anna, not the wife left behind, not the friend betrayed, but the strategist who reclaimed her life with precision, patience, and a touch of poetic justice. Tonight, Claire learned a lesson she will carry forever. Some things can't be stolen, only returned. And I was the one doing the returning.